drift from the bottom of Australia. If it's to find its own reliable energy source, then it has few other options than to look deeper inside its own territory.
The island's unique geography sparked an idea.
In the push to modernize, Tasmania had a great natural advantage. The interior is high elevation and filled with lakes and rivers.
Steep highlands, heavy rainfall, all they needed were the right tools to convert that water stream into electricity.
This is Wadamana Hydroelectric Power Station, Tasmania's answer to their energy crisis. But with no water source in sight, it would take a visionary professor called Alexander Macaulay to bring it to life.
Macaulay's vision was to realise the potential of the Great Lake, the largest naturally occurring body of freshwater in Tasmania. He could see by moving the water from the Great Lake to the edge of the plateau and then dropping it down the 300 metres to the Ouse River, he could generate an enormous amount of power.
Historian Chris Tassell has been sharing the story of Tasmania's hydroelectric beginnings for 6 years.
Most power stations till then had been built where the water was. He conceived of the notion of shifting the water, if I can put it that way, some 30, 40 kilometres. Quite an amazing notion.
But turning Macaulay's idea into reality was no easy task.
The challenge was, it was located right in the middle of the island where there were no roads, virtually no people.
So they essentially built an 18-mile tramway to haul all of these supplies up to Wadamana. We're talking about generators, turbines, pipes, everything you need to build this power station from scratch.
And events on the other side of the world further conspired against its construction.
In 1914, the First World War started. All the equipment was coming from Europe. Some of it didn't get here because it was either seized or it was lost in ships at sea.
The combination of brutal weather and rugged terrain also took its toll.
This was a horrific job because it's extraordinarily steep, the rock is extremely hard, dolerite, and for much of winter, the rock face is actually in the shadow all the time. So often the water which had frozen just didn't melt. So they had to break away the ice before they could get to the rock to break it, to construct the pathway for the pipes.
Tasmania had this vast source of potential energy, but it was going to take a lot of ingenuity and some very hardworking people to make it happen.
In this sparsely populated area, workers had to be brought in from far and wide.
In order to build and run the power plant, it wouldn't be possible for workers to just commute in and out. They needed a community here, one where people could live year-round, bring their wives and children, raise their families.
Peter Hardstaff was raised here and remembers how central the power station was to daily life.
There were rules. The village was run by a siren at the station. When the siren sounded at 8 o'clock in the morning, it meant we could go to the pool. And when it sounded at 5 o'clock at night, that was knock-off time. It meant that we had to be home for tea.
Industrialization is about more than just new machines. It's also about a new workforce, a new outlook, a new way of living.
And growing up next to a power plant came with its own unique dangers.
The rules were quite simple. You play in the switchyard, you're going to die. Play in the tail race, you're going to drown.
While hazardous, this infrastructure was also extremely efficient and influenced life all across Tasmania.
When the Wadamana Power Station opened, it kind of became the beating heart of the island.
It has to be remembered that for many years, the whole of the state grids was controlled from this room, this control office.
Controlling this power station was not a responsibility to be taken lightly.
Not much more than a decade ago, there was a problem in a structure very much like this at a power plant in Russia that exploded, destroyed the whole power plant, and killed several workers. Even today, operating a hydropower plant is not a trivial undertaking.
At its peak, Wadamana was a sight to behold.
This is the turbine hall. This is the heart of the power station. The 9 generating units are here. This is where the mechanical energy from the water coming from the central plateau was converted to electricity.
The amount of sheer energy traveling through this building when it was in operation would be something awesome. The whole building would be trembling slightly.
Sometimes the canals feeding the pipelines would ice over, and this would mean that ice would be fed right into the turbines, creating a sound that was likened to using a sledgehammer on a plate glass window.
The power plant's groundbreaking success was also its downfall. Other stations sprang up nearby, taking Wadamana's blueprints and improving on them.
After almost 50 years of operation, this plant was not really cutting edge anymore. Other plants had been built that were more efficient.
Despite its age, the power station was still operating remarkably well right up until it was shut down for good in 1966. While the turbines no longer turn, the station stands proudly as an example of human triumph over nature and adversity.
I think Wadamana is one of those very special places where you can actually feel the excitement of an original vision, an extraordinary achievement, despite everything, despite the weather, despite a location that defied the odds, despite a world war. They are able to come up and use cutting-edge technology